Imagine you live in a very big house. In this house, there are no written rules on the fridge. There are no signs on the door saying who can go where. Instead, everyone just knows the rules. They know which chair belongs to who. They know which rooms are for quiet time. This is how the royal family has lived for hundreds of years. They call it tradition. But what happens when someone decides that a simple knowing isn't enough anymore? What happens when a princess decides she needs a lawyer to make sure her favorite rooms stay hers forever? This is exactly what happened at a place called Sandringham. It is a story about a sister, a wife, and a king caught in the middle. It is a story about secret papers, missing jewelry, and a door that has been locked tight. For a long time, everything seemed calm, but behind the palace walls, a big storm was growing. Princess Anne, who is known for being very tough and very fair, did something that no one expected. She brought in the lawyers. This move sent a shock through the whole palace. It wasn't just about rooms, it was about power. It was about who gets to decide the future of the family's most private home. Everyone was asking the same thing: why did Anne do this now? And what does it mean for Queen Camilla? Let's look closer at this royal mystery. When Princess Anne's lawyers started their work, the quiet life of the royal family changed in a heartbeat. For a very long time, things at the big Sandringham estate were handled with a simple nod or a quiet word. No one felt they needed to write everything down on legal paper. It was just a private family deal that everyone respected. But suddenly that quiet deal turned into a big legal right. This move was one of the biggest shocks the palace has seen in many, many years. It was like a sudden bolt of lightning in a clear sky. Behind the quiet trees in the old walls of Sandringham, something very big was happening. A private claim was turned into a real law. This change helped Princess Anne keep something very special. It was something that Queen Camilla had been trying to stay close to for a long time. Now the people who work inside the palace are said to be very worried and upset. They call this being rattled. Loyalties are being tested like never before. People are starting to ask big questions about who will own what in the future and who really has the power in the family. But what exactly did Anne get for herself? And why did she choose this exact moment to act? For many years, a special part of the Sandringham house lived under a quiet royal understanding. This means that nobody felt they needed to use fancy legal words or sign big documents to say how things should work. It was just known. Everyone knew which rooms were for which people. Everyone knew the daily routines and how things were used. It was all treated as settled, which means it was finished and decided. People who were close to the family were expected to follow these invisible rules. They weren't supposed to ask any awkward or difficult questions. They were expected to keep family matters private and not turn them into official business. In a house that is built on old traditions, that kind of silence is very powerful. It lets old habits stay the same for a long time without anyone trying to change them. It makes the family look calm and happy on the outside, even if there are no clear rules written down on paper. It is like a secret language that only the family speaks. However, arrangements like that depend on one very important thing: trust. Trust is like a bridge. As long as the bridge is strong, everyone can walk across it safely. But the very moment that trust starts to get weak, even the oldest customs and habits start to feel unsafe. What used to feel steady and strong can suddenly start to look very shaky. What once felt protected by family love and respect can suddenly feel like it could be taken away. This can happen because of pressure from others, or because people's loyalties start to shift and change. It can even happen because of quiet interference, which is when someone tries to change things behind your back. This seems to be the exact point that Princess Anne reached. From where she was standing, the old way of doing things just didn't look strong enough anymore. She felt she had to protect her family's place within the big estate. She didn't think the unwritten rules would keep things safe for much longer. That is why what Anne did next was so serious. She didn't just sit back and hope that people would be nice. She didn't wait and stay patient, hoping that tradition would be enough to keep things the way they were. Instead, she did something very bold. She allowed her lawyers to step in. She took an old, unwritten deal and turned it into something formal and legally recognized. In the world of kings and queens, this is a massive move. It changes the tone, or the feeling, of everything right away. Suddenly, the matter isn't just about what a family prefers. It becomes a legal claim. A legal claim has weight, it has a structure, and it has protection from the law. This shift is what made everyone stop and pay attention. Something that had only survived because of a habit was now being protected by a powerful legal shield. This was a much harder thing for anyone to challenge or fight against. The atmosphere around the house would have changed the second those papers were signed. A space that was once protected by custom, which is just doing things the way they've always been done, was now protected by the law. That is a very different kind of protection. It tells us that the things that were quietly accepted for many years were no longer safe. Silence was no longer enough to keep them protected. Inside the big palace walls, this change felt very loud. It wasn't just about a single room or a wing of a house or even about being comfortable. It was about standing, which means how important you are in the family. It was about memory and the question of who has the right to hold on to things that have always belonged to them. Once the lawyers were involved, the old deal didn't look temporary or informal anymore. It looked like a permanent claim to an inheritance that was finally being locked into place. The legal claim Princess Anne made to part of Sandringham left the people inside the palace feeling stunned. Stunned means they were so surprised they almost couldn't believe it. No one saw it coming. But why did her claim cause such a big surprise? And what does this mean for Camilla, who is the queen consort? Let's try to find out the real truth behind Anne's big move. The legal step she took was like a door quietly closing on Camilla at Sandringham. The palace didn't just react because of the paperwork. Paperwork by itself doesn't make people that upset. What really shook everyone was what those papers decided once and for all. They didn't just record a legal step, they seemed to answer a very sensitive question. They answered the question of who had the strongest hold over a very personal part of royal life. This is what made the whole thing feel so heavy and serious. It was like a final decision that couldn't be changed. Queen Camilla had reportedly spent many years trying to make her place in the royal household stronger. She did this in many ways. She did it by going to public events and doing her official duties. She also did it by carefully building her image so people would like her. But she also did it through quiet influence. Influence is a way of getting what you want without being loud about it. In private family life, this often matters more than anything else. Having access to things matters. Having privacy matters. Being able to feel safe and secure in certain rooms and spaces matters a lot. In a family like the royals, control isn't always something people shout about. Sometimes power is built just by being around all the time. It is built by being familiar and by slowly shaping the world so that you feel the most comfortable. It is a very subtle way of gaining power. Sandringham is much more important than just a normal country house. It isn't just a place with a lot of history. It is a place that is tied to status, which means how high up you are in the family. It is tied to memories and the special kind of authority you get when you feel at ease in the family's most private spaces. Having your own private wing in a house like that means more than just having a nice place to sleep. It shows that you belong there. It shows that you are part of the inner order of the family. So when Anne's lawyers moved to make sure that wing was hers by law, it was a very big deal. It was like drawing a hard line in the sand around something that Camilla wanted more influence over. The move wasn't just Anne being sentimental or following an old habit. It was Anne using the law to take hold of something Camilla had been trying to keep close for years. A quiet royal deal had suddenly become formal and defined. It was now much harder for anyone to bend or change. Once that happened, the palace could no longer pretend it was just a normal family argument. The legal move made it look like Anne had won. She had fixed her claim in place, while Camilla was left looking at a door that had been shut tight. In the life of a royal, a shift like this is never small. It changes how people see the house and how they measure who has the most power. It told everyone that the rules were no longer flexible. You couldn't use quiet pressure or polite delays to get your way anymore. The palace was shocked by the documents Anne showed to support her claim. These documents might limit how much Camilla can use the estate, but what is the history of Sandringham? Why does it matter so much? And could the rights the late Queen Elizabeth had now be out of reach for the current queen? Sandringham is more than just a royal estate. It is a special kind of importance that is hard to compare to any other place the king owns. It isn't just a fancy house or a place to go for a vacation in the country. It belongs to the private heart of royal life. This is the place where family memories, things they inherit, and the family hierarchy all come together. Hierarchy is just a word for who is the boss and who comes next. That is what gives Sandringham its unusual power. In the public eye, the monarchy is about big parades, duty, and formal rules. But Sandringham is where the family can hide away from the cameras. It is a more personal world. It is shaped by rituals, things they do every year, and private routines. It is where they feel like a real family and not just symbols on a balcony. For many generations, the royals have gathered at Sandringham. They go there to be together in their own protected space. Christmas at Sandringham is a very big tradition that has lasted a long time. There are also many smaller moments that never make it into the news, but they help the family feel like they belong together. The estate isn't just about royal ceremonies, it's about continuity, which means things staying the same over a long time. This is one reason it matters so much to everyone. Another reason is the emotional weight it carries now. It was the place where the beloved Queen Elizabeth II spent her very last days. Because of that, Sandringham has an even deeper place in everyone's hearts. It is a living part of the story of the late Queen. The walls, the rooms, and the big grassy grounds of Sandringham hold the echo of a queen who ruled for many decades. Because of this, family, tradition, and royal identity are all mixed together there. You can't really separate them. This means that a fight over Sandringham isn't just a simple fight over rooms or who gets to walk on the grass. It feels like a fight about who truly belongs. It feels like a fight about the hidden order of the family. In a normal family, a fight over property is serious. But at Sandringham, it feels much bigger because the place itself is a symbol of authority. Once lawyers get involved, the problem doesn't look private anymore. It looks like a battle over one of the family's most important strongholds. It shows that trust and memory are no longer enough to keep things safe. People see this as a warning sign that something deep inside the royal family has changed forever. Royal families don't stay strong just because of fancy crowns and parades. They survive because they know how to stay silent. They have a habit of keeping uncomfortable matters behind closed doors. On the outside, everything looks perfect and controlled, but on the inside, there's often tension. This tension is usually handled in a very quiet way. People use polite words, or they stay patient and wait, or they just say they are doing it for duty. This old method worked at Sandringham for a very long time. People were just expected to know where they stood. They didn't need every single detail written down in a book. Certain spaces were used in certain ways, and everyone just understood that. The family used their memories and their good manners to keep everything balanced. Difficult questions didn't always need an answer because everyone was supposed to respect the invisible lines that were already there. This kind of system can last for a long time, especially in a family that loves tradition. But it only works if everyone believes that those invisible lines will be followed. If people start to doubt each other, the silence that used to keep the peace can start to feel like a weakness. The same discretion, which means being careful with what you say, can start to hide real fights. What used to feel calm can suddenly feel very fragile. That is why Anne's legal move is such a big deal. It suggests that the old way of doing things just isn't working anymore. It isn't reliable. Once you bring a lawyer into a private family deal, the whole meaning changes. The matter is no longer loose or flexible. It doesn't depend on people being nice or having good faith. You can't just fix it with nice words or by waiting a long time. It becomes formal and defined. It means one side is ready to fight for what they want using more than just tradition. In a royal house, this move speaks very loudly, even if no one says a word to the public. This is what makes the moment feel so serious. A line that used to exist just because of memory now needs the power of the law to hold it up. This tells us that things had already changed inside the family long before we heard about it. The legal step didn't create the tension, it just showed us how bad the tension had already become. People inside the palace understand this right away. It means the old system isn't trusted anymore. It means quiet understanding isn't enough to keep things safe. Ideally, a place like Sandringham shouldn't need a formal legal claim. So what could have made Princess Anne draw such a clear line between herself and Camilla? Was she worried that Camilla was stepping into the late Queen Elizabeth's legacy? Was she trying to stop the same thing from happening at Sandringham? Around the same time this fight was happening, there were whispers about missing heirlooms. Heirlooms are very old and valuable things like jewelry that are passed down from one family member to another. Some people said these items were missing, or they were being hidden, or they were being handled in a way that made people feel uneasy. This made the whole story feel much more intense. These weren't just expensive things, they were full of memories. They were a part of the late Queen's personal history. Every piece of jewelry was tied to a life of hard work and duty. The late Queen was a symbol of being steady for the whole country for many years. That is why the whispers about the jewels mattered so much. The moment those items were mentioned, the fight wasn't just about rooms anymore. It felt heavier and more emotional. It was even more dangerous for the palace. Sandringham was important because it was private territory, but the jewelry added the idea of legacy. Legacy is what you leave behind after you are gone. It brought up the big question of who has the right to guard or manage the things Queen Elizabeth left. In that way, the house and the jewels are like two different parts of the same puzzle. Sandringham is about family space, but the jewels are about status and memory. Even though the Queen is gone, her things still represent her. When you put these two things together, the conflict becomes very hard to stop. It doesn't look like a small fight over a room anymore. It looks like a big struggle over who the palace trusts to be the guardian of the Queen's legacy. This is where the story gets its emotional power. People aren't just reacting to a family fight. They are afraid that the symbols of the late Queen's life are being used in a power struggle. The estate and the jewels together show a palace that is under a lot of strain, which means a lot of stress. They are trying to look calm on the outside, but underneath there are big questions about who is in charge and who is loyal. From Princess Anne's point of view, the fight over Sandringham and the worry over the jewels were both part of the same big problem. On the surface, they might look different. One is about a house and one is about shiny objects. But to Anne, they both showed the same thing. The lines that used to protect the Queen's private world were starting to fade away. To her, this was not a small change. It was something that was no longer safe to ignore. This is what made Anne's reaction so strong. She didn't seem like someone who was just having a small misunderstanding. She seemed like someone who saw a big warning sign appearing over and over again. In her eyes, Sandringham wasn't just about who used a certain wing of the house. The jewelry wasn't just about pretty things. Both of these things sent the same message. The rules that were set by the late Queen were being tested or moved. Anne has spent her whole life standing up for duty and rules. She likes the quiet strength of her mother's way of doing things. So the moment she felt those old limits were getting loose, she was definitely going to react. She is calm, but she is very firm. She believes that if you wait too long, things will change forever. She didn't want to just look away or let the problem disappear into a palace hush. Instead, she moved with a very clear purpose. She wanted to make sure things stayed the way they should be. Sandringham and the jewels soon became symbols of this fight. Sandringham was sacred family ground, tied to history and quiet rules. The jewelry was about the Queen's memory and her public image. When both became part of the same fight, it wasn't a private matter anymore. It was a serious battle over who has the right to represent everything the Queen left behind. Every time someone stays silent, that silence feels weaker. Every private understanding starts to look like it could be rewritten by someone else. Because of this, Anne's firmness doesn't look dramatic, it looks necessary. She believed that the Queen's legacy could no longer be protected just by tradition. She felt she had to take a bold step, and that step hit Camilla very hard. Was this move driven by old feelings between Anne and Camilla? They haven't always had an easy history together. Long before Sandringham was the problem, these two women represented two very different ways of having power. Anne built her place through hard work, discipline, and being very loyal to the family structure. She earned her respect by showing up every day and treating her royal job as something very serious. She doesn't think it's just about being decorative or looking pretty. Camilla's path was very different. She didn't have everyone's respect at the beginning. She had to wait a long time. She had to deal with people being mean and criticizing her for years. She had to slowly rebuild how the public saw her. When you have to fight that hard to be accepted, you learn a different set of instincts. Anne trusts clarity and rules. She believes that things only stay safe when people stop trying to change the rules to fit themselves. Camilla, on the other hand, has learned how to work through difficult times. She knows how to adjust to different moods and how to keep going until people stop fighting her. Neither woman is weak. Both are very strong, but their strengths are not the same. They are like two different kinds of puzzle pieces that don't always fit together. This is why the fight was so intense once Sandringham and the Queen's legacy were involved. The disagreement didn't just come out of nowhere. The distance between them was already there. It was likely built over many years of making different choices and having different ideas about how to be a royal. Once those differences were put under pressure, they couldn't stay quiet anymore. Sandringham brought up questions about rights and position in the family. The late Queen's legacy brought up questions about memory and responsibility. When you put them together, the fight becomes very personal. Anne wasn't just defending a house, and Camilla wasn't just defending her comfort. Both women were standing in a conflict that had been growing for a long time. The legal fight pulled this old tension out of the shadows. It forced it into the light where no one in the palace could pretend it wasn't there. To people on the outside, this tension stayed hidden because both women know how to be restrained. This means they know how to keep their feelings inside, but being restrained doesn't make a conflict go away. It just hides it until something happens that is too big to ignore. Even though they took different paths, both women are now very powerful. But could history actually be on Anne's side? What makes Anne such a strong force in the family? One reason her legal move was so powerful is because of her reputation. For many years, she has been the royal that people don't link with drama. She doesn't have big emotional outbursts, and she doesn't try to get attention. She just works. She's known for being steady and disciplined. People see her as practical and very loyal to the way her mother did things. This background changes how people see her actions. If a person who is always loud and dramatic calls a lawyer, people might think they're just being mean or trying to get ahead. But Anne isn't like that. She's the royal who says the least and complains the least. So when she decides that custom isn't enough, it feels very heavy. Inside the palace, this wouldn't look like she was being reckless. It would look like a warning. It would mean that one of the most careful people in the family thinks the old rules are broken. In a family that is all about tradition and quiet deals, this is a very serious signal. It shows that the old protections have become weak. Anne's reputation is what gave her legal move its power. It made it hard for anyone to just laugh it off or say she was just being emotional. People couldn't say it was just about her being proud or having a little family fight. The move came from someone who doesn't act without thinking. It felt measured and final. In a way, Anne herself became the proof that something was wrong. Her character made the claim strong even before anyone read the papers. She proved that she doesn't act lightly. When someone like that says a line must be drawn, people believe that the problem is very serious. Because of this, Anne had an authority that very few other royals could have. She has built such a strong place for herself that any claim she makes cannot be ignored, especially if it affects Camilla. But how will King Charles handle this? He is in a very difficult spot. He is caught between his sister and his wife. No king ever wants to be in this position. This wasn't just a small family tiff. It was much heavier than that. On one side is his sister Anne. She is known for her duty and her hard work. She isn't looking for attention. When she moves, people listen because she doesn't do things without a good reason. On the other side is his wife, Queen Camilla. She is his closest friend. She has worked hard for many years to find her place. Path has been very hard and she has faced a lot of doubt. By the time this fight started, her role was finally feeling secure. This made the situation even harder for Charles. He wasn't just looking at a fight between a sister and some random person. He was looking at two of the most important people in his life. Both of them are very important to him personally and to his job as king. This makes every choice feel dangerous. If he sides with Anne, it looks like he's being mean to his wife. If he sides with Camilla, it looks like he is ignoring his sister, who everyone respects. In the world of kings and queens, these choices are never private. Every single move he makes has a meaning. Even if he stays silent, that silence has a meaning too. Silence doesn't always make things better. It can sometimes make things worse. It gives people time to feel hurt and it gives suspicion time to grow. It lets both sides stay stuck in their ways while the rest of the world can see that something is wrong. Once the lawyers and the talk of jewelry were involved, Charles wasn't just dealing with a family talk. He was in the middle of a battle over space, legacy, and power. He was trying to keep a very fragile balance. The people closest to him were pulling that balance in different directions, and it was very hard for him to choose without making the crisis worse. Even if Anne won her legal fight over Sandringham, the wound inside the palace didn't just heal up. In fact, the legal move might have fixed one part of the problem but showed a much bigger one underneath. Royal families need trust and inherited habits to work properly. They need to believe that they can keep their private lives secret. When that system fails and people start using lawyers, it shows that trust is broken. Something that used to be safe is now under threat. This is what gave the fight its real force. It wasn't just about rooms or access anymore. Once the fight involved the late Queen's heirlooms, the whole mood changed. The issue didn't feel small anymore. It looked like a fight over who was the most legitimate and who had the right to protect what the Queen left behind. In the life of a royal, jewels are never just pretty rocks. They mean something. They represent the line that connects one king or queen to the next. When the fight about Sandringham and the jewels happened at the same time, the palace looked less stable. It showed that the family was not as united as they wanted us to think. Anne came out of this looking even stronger and more resolved. She didn't look like she was being emotional. She looked like someone who had finally had enough. She looked like the only person who was willing to set a firm rule when the old rules stopped working. Camilla, on the other hand, looked more exposed, which means she looked more vulnerable. People didn't just think she had lost a little bit of ground. They thought she had tried to take more than the family was willing to give her. In the world of the royals, your image is everything. If people start thinking you're pushing too hard, it can cause a lot of damage that lasts for a long time. Anne didn't just resist, she secured and held onto what she believed was hers. In doing that, she did more than win a fight. She showed everyone how much stress the palace is under. The claim might be over, but the family still looks divided and uneasy. It is a moment that might change the monarchy forever. What do you think about Anne's big decision? Could it change how Camilla is seen in the future? We want to know what you think, so please leave a comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.